For today's short meditation, let us turn our pages to Psalms 78, verses 65 to 72. When the Lord awoke as from sleep, as a man wakes from the stupor of wine, he beat back his enemies, he put them to everlasting shame. Then he rejected the tents of Joseph. He did not choose the tribe of Ephraim, but he chose the tribe of Judah, Mount Zion, which he loved. He built a sanctuary like the heights, like the earth that he established forever. He chose David his servant and took him from the sheep pens. From tending the sheep, he bought him to be the shepherd of his people Jacob, of Israel his inheritance. And David shepherded them with integrity of heart, with skillful hands he led them. So we see that how David, being from servant to ruler, he was a shepherd, from shepherd to being a ruler. We know that David has done a lot of sins. We see that he has committed adultery and he made a man drunk and murdered him. In addition, he once did census and in disobedience with God. And because of that, we see 70,000 people died. But still, we see that David was still a great man and God forgave him and used him in a wonderful way. Firstly, as we read these verses from 65 to 72, we see that David was a man of humility. He also chose David to be his servant, and he took him from the sheepfolds. From being a shepherd, he brought him to be king of Israel, to be the king of the people. And we see that in verse 72, 71. David began as a servant and God made him a ruler. That's always God's pattern. We see that God always brings in unexpected ways and he uses everybody. It's not that he uses only the talented people, he uses only the kings and the high people. He uses from the very lowest point. And we see that God's blessing was on David because he was very faithful in his job. Not only when he was a king, but even when he was a shepherd, even when he was a servant, God sees how faithful David was. Even in small things. That's why when we need to be very careful even in our small things, not just doing some big things. We should be faithful even in doing little things. And we see that in Matthew chapter 25 verses 21, Jesus said in one of his parables, he says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You are faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord." For example, if you want to be a leader or if you want to be a ruler, learn how to be a servant. When we learn how to be a servant, we can be a ruler by faithfully doing what God has called us to do. So it's not that we need to start from being a ruler or start from being a leader or start from being a king. It all starts in our lowest, when we are a servant, when we are a shepherd. We need to be faithful in the little things. And secondly, in verse 72, we see that David was a man of integrity. In verse 72, it says, "And David shepherded them with integrity of heart, with skillful hands he led them." Integrity means having one heart, whereas a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways, is what James 1 verse 8 says. If you are being double-minded, we can't be having this integrity in our heart. We need to have integrity, having is one heart, being in one-minded. But when we are being led in being double-minded, it leads us to astray. And it makes our ways unstable. So in order to be stable in our ways, we need to have this integrity of having this one heart and one-minded. David's sole purpose, we see in the Old Testament, was to serve the Lord, and he did that. And in continue verses with 72, we see that David was a man of ability. In second part of verse 72, it says, With skillful hands, he led them. He had the skill. He had the ability. He was very blessed with skillful hands. And integrity, when we have integrity, it ties with our heart and our hands together. Like your heart serves the Lord and your hands are busy for Him. That's what our integrity should be, just like how David was. We need people like that even today. It's not impossible for us to be like that. It is all possible when we are dependent on God. No amount of dedication or compensation is required, or is not a lack of skill. But having the amount of skill and compromising and can compensate with the lack of dedication, it's not possible. So we need both. We need the dedication of our hearts and we need our skillful hands. So we don't need to be double-minded, but rather we need to be in one mind and in one heart. And we see that David exhibits these traits as being a ruler with humility, integrity, and ability. These are the three things we need to point out today, and these are very much required in faithfully serving God. And our whole life purpose in this world is to faithfully serve God. And from David we learn today these three things are very important. First, David was being a man of humility. Second, David was a man of integrity. And thirdly, David was a man of ability. You and me need to have these traits in our life: humility, integrity, and ability. We need to have these traits not just in our mind, but even in our works, in our heart and in our mind. So holy, we need to faithfully serve God alone. And we need to dedicate ourselves no matter when, even today. We need to dedicate everything that we do for God's glory alone. Amen.